want to try to teach something other that we've been taught years and years and years about. And my notes, I told Brother Terry Leach, I said, I'm always just throw my notes in the trash because I don't go by them, I can't see them, I can't read fast enough, but my mind, my brain and the words don't correspond with each other, yet don't confuse. But do pray for me, and it's a subject we've heard before, but it's a very, very important subject for God's people, and I hope that we can apply it to our lives and think about, the devil's out to just trick us in every way he can. And if you know God's word, be very thankful, because that's what we fight off Satan with, is the word of God. And we don't physically have a battle with him necessarily, but it's a spiritual warfare we fighting against Satan every day. We're to put on the whole armor of God. And that's what I want to try to look at in kind of go different directions probably than what my notes are, but we're all soldiers. Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 8, it tells us that there is no discharge in God's army. What that means is, back when I was in the Navy, you could get an honorable discharge, two different types of discharges. You could get an honorable discharge, or you could get a dishonorable discharge. But in God's army, there is no discharge. And so once you're born of the Spirit of God, and God has blessed you and enlightened you about the kingdom and eternal salvation and grace and saved by grace and the doctrines, we're in an army. And there is no discharge in that army. And who is the captain of that army?
Jesus.
Jesus Christ is the captain. He's the captain of that army. Back when I played football, we had helmets, we had shoulder pads, we had knee pads and thigh pads, and shoes that had a steel toe in them, some of them. And they were to protect us from getting harm or hurt real bad. Even in that, a lot of people would get legs broke and things like that. But if you had no armor at all on, it would be pretty dumb to go out there and hit head on somebody with it. I mean, armors are important. And this particular passage in Ephesians chapter 6, if you'll turn there, who wants to read this morning? Virgil, you want to read? How about turn to Ephesians chapter 6 and read 10 through 17. And that 16th verse is what I want to mainly focus on, but this is whenever Paul was writing to the Ephesians, and he was telling them that the warfare that they were going to engage in was not a war of the flesh, but it was a spiritual warfare. So start with verse 10, Brother Virgil, and start reading it.
Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil, wills of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girded about you, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God.
Okay? Go ahead.
Praying always with all power, prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints. And for me that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in the bonds that therein may be quoted as I ought to be. But that ye may also make know my affairs and how I do.
All right, that's far enough, Brother Burton. Notice that verse 16 says above all what? All these
All
other
these
things.
things he's
Huh?
talking- All these things he's mentioned.
All these things, he says finally, that means this is it. This is what Paul was writing to them, and he said this is it. Finally, he said, finally my brethren, be strong in the Lord. And then he comes right on down in verse 16, he tells about all these things, rulers of darkness of this world, and the wiles of the tricks of the devil and so forth. And he comes down to verse 16 and says, above all, take the shield of faith wherein you shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked. What is a dart or an arrow? It's a missile, isn't it? I mean, it's something, back in the old Roman days, they would throw spears or shoot arrows at, the Roman soldiers would, and they'd fire them at them, and those were the missiles or the arrows. And he's telling us here that these are spiritual arrows. I love to shoot a bow and arrow, David does, and several in the church were shooting, Brother Richard and so forth, and we enjoyed shooting those arrows, and we could pinpoint them down. We got where we was fairly good. It was not trying to say we're being proud, but we narrowed it down where we could hit the target pretty good. We started competing with one another, and I didn't do too good in competition. I started off good, but it didn't wind up too good. That's far as I'll go with that. But the main point is those arrows, they were centered into in the target. You had a specific place with a high number. We put a 10 or 20 or whatever, 10 points if you hit it. We were all getting pretty good, 10 points. Well, that's the way Satan is with his arrows that he fires at us. He may fire at us and hit us in the arm or whatever. Well, the reason you're getting hit with that missile or that arrow is because you don't have it covered up right. You got an armor that God gives you, a spiritual armor. He gives you a helmet. You know, if your mind's not right, you think it's not right, where is Satan going to fire that dart, that missile? He's going to fire it to your head. It's going to be a dead kill. So sometimes our thinking is wrong. We think evil thoughts. So we have to be constantly checking our spiritual armor that we have, that God has blessed us with. I think over in James, I believe it says, whatsoever pure, whatsoever honest, think on these things. That's what we ought to be doing, thinking on things of God instead of worldly things. Go ahead, Mike, you got something?
No.
So that helmet is important. That helmet in football is important. It's important. You get your head busted open, you get knocked out or unconscious, have a, what do you call them, concussion, if you don't have your helmet on. Well, the same way in a spiritual way, you got to have that helmet. And those arrows are coming, and that's where Satan's going to penetrate, is a weak point. If I leave that helmet off, what's going to happen? The rest of the body's covered. They got all the armor on, it's that one piece. Every piece of that armor is important. Every piece of it. What if I left the breastplate off? But Mike, what would happen to my heart?
You die.
Well, he's going to shoot those arrows to you.
Right at your heart or chest or.
Well, I just think about some different ones that I thought about whenever I was trying to study this. I thought about Thomas himself. Thomas, he was a doubter, wasn't he? Will Satan shoot those darts of doubt on your mind and heart? Sometimes we'll doubt what God has given us, and that's where he's going to penetrate. And when he starts firing those darts of doubt, we'll even doubt God's word, won't we? I've had times in my life I don't really believe like this. You know what I'm saying? And I see it this way. And sometimes the devil penetrates our heart, and we do see things different. I mean, you could study with people, and they may have a different opinion on what they say and what you believe in the truth. And when you do that, when you're like that, and you have that doubt in your mind, you need to stop and keep studying, or even quit studying for a day or two, and get your mind right and your heart right, and then go back and pray that God will bless you to open your eyes to the truth of what He's got in His Word. So even doubt itself, we begin to doubt. Thomas doubted Christ. What did he say to Jesus? He said, I want to what?
To touch me.
I want to put my hand to this. I want to feel you. I want to touch it. And sometimes we're just, those arrows fly at us, and we're not covered with that part of armor, and we begin to doubt things. Another one that is fear itself. Sometimes we get fearful, don't we? We get scared. We don't really trust God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and sometimes we fear, and that's an arrow that Satan is shooting at us, is for us to fear. Mike, read Psalms 91 verse 5 for me, if you would. Think about the Lord is right there with us, but we need to have that armor on, and He's telling us He's going to protect us here in this particular verse.
91:5.
Yep. Psalms 91:5.
Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in the darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday.
All right, that's far enough. Well, sometimes we fear, but He's telling us here in Psalm 91:5 not to fear for those arrows that fly by night and by day. He is our strength every day. God is our strength. Habakkuk 3:19 says, the Lord God is my strength. And I don't need to fear what man does to you. Fear is a bad thing. We're to fear God, aren't we? Ecclesiastes tells us the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments. But we're not to fear what man will do to us. We fear Russia, we fear China, we fear Iraq, we fear all these people that we're fighting against. But greater is He that is in you that is in the world. The Bible tells us that we can depend on Him because He is our strength in time of our weakness. So those arrows are coming. They're going to be flying to you. And we have fear, we have doubt. I thought about over here, turn to 1 Samuel. You can't hardly get by with this lesson unless you mention about David and Goliath. In Psalms, we're in Psalm 17. Let's go down to verse 38. Both David, will you start? Huh?
1 Samuel.
1 Samuel. What did I say? Psalm? Probably did. That's one of the moments I was talking about a while ago. Turn to Samuel, not Psalms. Samuel 17, start with verse 38. And we know the story about what happened here. David's brothers was in the army, and there was a big giant. His name was Goliath. We've heard it from our youth up. And this giant was taunting the children of God, Israel. And they feared him. Well, did the arrow penetrate them? They was fearing, wasn't it? The arrow of fear from Satan was penetrating them. And they had this big giant out there, Goliath, and he was taunting. And when David come from home and he went and saw his brothers and so forth, but basically here's what happened in verse 38. They tried to put an armor on him. And he had, go ahead David, read that, Samuel 17:38. Wherever.
And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor. And he essayed to go, and he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him, And he took his staff in his hand, and he chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and he put them in his shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near unto the Philistine, and the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel.
Right. Was the children of Israel afraid? They were afraid. Was David afraid? No, David wasn't afraid.
He was already armed.
He was already armed. They were going to take, in verse 38 there, notice this, it says, and Saul armed David. Who was Saul? He was the king. The king himself, I'm sure, had the best armor that you could get, wouldn't you think? And in this 38th verse it says, and Saul the king armed David with his armor, and put the helmet of brass upon his head, also armed him with a coat of mail, and David girded up the sword upon the armor, and saved to go, for he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, I have not proved them. He said, I killed a lion, and I killed a bear. And this giant, or this person that's out there, is taunting Israel, and you are afraid of him? I'm in the army of God. I'm a soldier of Jesus Christ, and I'm not afraid of him. He wasn't scared, not none, or not any. But he took out, he said, King Saul, I can't use your armor. I got to use the armor God has given me. It's a spiritual warfare we're fighting. It's not a carnal warfare that's taught over in the Corinthian letter. But we're fighting a spiritual warfare. Even though he was going against a natural giant, it was a spiritual warfare at this time. And not only did he was going to fight the giant, who was in front of the giant?
His armor.
He had an armor barrier. I always thought about just David fighting the Goliath, and that was it. Well, he was also, there was a armored barrier that went, so he had to go over him also, if you get thinking about it. The armor bearer was to protect the giant. Well, it doesn't say a whole lot about the armor bearer and him killing him first, but I'm sure he had to go through him because he had an armor bearer in front of him. But the point is, he did not want that natural armor. He said it has not been proven, but God's armor has been proven. He had took care of me, and I'm not afraid of that giant. And he slung a rock and hit him right between the eyes and killed him. And then cut his head off. Remember that? Why was David protected? Because he had God's armor on there, and those fiery darts or those arrows were flinging to him in doubt, and David had no doubt. He knew his God would deliver him, and his God did deliver him. He fired those darts in his head, his everywhere, his heart, everything. But David was steadfast, and that's what it tells us in Ephesians chapter 6, to stand firm. We're to stand firm when the devil shoots those darts. The devil is out to destroy and to kill every one of us. And we best have that armor, all of it, not part of it, on. Says over in Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, what's an adversary? It's enemy. The devil is a roaring lion walking about, seeking whom he may devour. He is out to destroy you with those fiery darts. And you got something to keep them off with, that armor. He tells us that we're to trust in. The Bible tells us in John 8:44 that the devil is a liar, and a murderer, and a thief. Can you trust him? No. You better trust in the Lord. It tells us over in Psalms, it says, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. Lean not to thine own understanding, but in all ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct thy paths and thy ways. He'll take care of you if we trust in him. Ephesians 4:27. Y'all remember me teaching about that, I'm sure. It says, neither give place to who? The devil. Don't never give him advantage over you. If you ever give the devil advantage, he will destroy you. So we're to not to allow Satan, neither give place to Satan in our minds, hearts, and souls, and so forth. The gods of this world, are there many gods of this world? Do they blind your eyes? Yes, they do. God says for us to be careful. I thought about those three beginnings of sin, and you can't hardly teach a lesson on sin at all unless you mention it. It says the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, and the lust of flesh. They're not in order. But that's in 1 John chapter 2:11, I think it is. But the lust of the eyes, what did Satan do with Adam and Eve? The lust of the eyes. They saw it, didn't they? Then they took it. And then they did eat. And they did die. It was all because they knew better. The lust of the eyes. The devil had won that. He shot that arrow over there, and the lust of the eyes, they went for it. They saw it was good to eat. So they went. Do we have lust in our heart? That's an arrow that we have to watch after. We may lust after things of this world, and it will destroy you. The pride of life. Nebuchadnezzar was a child of God from the word go. But Nebuchadnezzar, that arrow of pride penetrated his heart. And he said, look what great Babylon it is that I built. And what happened to him? He was brought down, and he for 7 years, I believe it was, he was tortured and lived a hell. And he said then at the last part, he said, mine understanding returned unto me. So that's how I feel like he was a child of God, because you have no understanding until God gives you understanding. And then once you have understanding, he says you can be destroyed if you don't stay in that understanding, because he says in Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. So they don't have no understanding or knowledge. And that's whenever Satan has penetrated your heart and you go far away from him and straight from him. Am I making sense? I want you to see that Satan has some darts, and some fiery darts that will destroy every one of us. He says in 2 Corinthians 11:14, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. If he can shoot that fiery dart and convince you, I'm the true God, the devil, and my ministers are as ministers of righteousness, and all these things, then he has won that battle. But Satan is a deceiver, and he will camouflage himself in any way he can to destroy God's little lambs or God's children. Greater is he that is in you than is in the world. We need to remember that and keep that armor on, and we won't be destroyed by Satan and give place to Satan. It's a spiritual battle, and the only ones that are in that battle are children of God. He is our strength in time of weakness. And we must put on that whole armor and be ready for those fiery darts that are coming, because they coming. And it may be today, maybe next week, it may be 10 years. But those darts and arrows are coming, and he's gonna kill you if he can. I pray the Lord bless us to know that Satan is real and Satan is alive, and we gotta be careful of it. You know,
Going back to David, we always look at him when in the battle against the giant.
Mhm.
If you look, I had never thought about it until we were just looking at it. His brothers condemned him for being there. He was just trying to show off being up there. So he had to have on the helmet of salvation, to have the confidence and knowledge that God was going to protect him. And then when he went to Saul, Saul told him, "You're just a youth. This is a man that's been a man of war since his youth." So he had to have the shield of faith. Right? I mean, you can just see, if you read this whole thing, you can see all the armor on him before he goes up to the battle.
but they didn't leave none of it off when he went to battle. That's the main point is, remember the wiles and tricks of the devil? He's gonna trick you if he can. And he's good at it. He's a trapper. He's a good trapper. And he'll trap you if he can. And it's all but, you know, you say, well, God has already won. He's in control and he's already won the battle. This is true. God but he's allowed Satan. Now why? I'm not going to try to answer why God allows Satan to do some of the things he does. But Job himself is a good example. The devil shot every arrow he could at Job. But Job had that shield of faith. And he trusted God, and he was willing to die to serve him, God. And that's the way you got to be. Did you dismiss us now?